Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Healthy Innovators TV. My name is Barry Schreier and I'm your host. As you know, every week we feature a whole group of very talented and motivated people working at the cutting edge of innovation in the world of healthcare and technology. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Giant Health. Giant Health is Europe's leading event, bringing together people from all across the world involved in healthcare, business, technology, and innovation. This year, the Giant Health event takes place on the 21st and 22nd of November in London. And if you'd like to learn more, please go to www.gianthealthevent.com. Once again, thank you to the Giant Health team for sponsoring this episode of Healthy Innovators TV. Our format is as follows. I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves, and then we're going to talk about some of the leading issues in healthcare and what the promise of innovation in technology holds to address some of these big issues. I think it's fair to say that we all share a big vision, which is to improve the health and the well-being of people around the world by promoting innovation in health tech and also supporting health tech entrepreneurs. So glad to see you guys, obviously, and thank you very much for joining us. Clara, nice to see you. How are things going?
Really well. Nice to be here. Thanks, Barry.
Good. If you don't mind, if you could briefly introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Clara Del Mar, and I'm a director at a company called Nuada Medical. And for the past 10 years, we have evolved as a specialist imaging center for prostate cancer. And
Excellent.
This all actually evolved from some trials that were being done at UCLH that were published about a year and a half ago and have really revolutionized the pathway for diagnosing and ultimately treating prostate cancer. And our mission now is to really roll out and scale and diffuse those innovations which have taken place over the last 10 years right here in London.
Very
and to
exciting.
make that kind of technology accessible to both patients and clinicians and to hospitals around the country and around the world.
Excellent. Well, it's fabulous stuff and looking forward to hearing more about that. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And Aubrey, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. If you don't mind introducing yourself, please, and just
Sure,
talking
yeah.
briefly about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I work on aging in general. Of course, prostate cancer, which we just heard about, is one aspect of that. We work, when I say we, I mean Sense Research Foundation, which is the research charity that has been created around my work, and we're based in California. We work on every aspect of the decline in health that happens during late life, but we don't just work on it in the sense that the medical profession in general works on it. We are interested, and this again actually comes back to what you were saying, in the idea of being preventative.
Okay.
Trying to get rid of the molecular and cellular changes, the damage that the body does to itself throughout life as a kind of side effect of being alive. And we're interested in developing ways to repair that damage so that it never gets to the point that exceeds what the body is set up to tolerate.
Right.
We are, as I said, a non-profit, but we are, at this point, in fact, for the past few years, our kind of, if you like, our business model is to bring projects to a sufficient level of proof of concept that we can spin them out as actual bona fide startup companies.
Oh, excellent.
Which, of course, are able to attract money from people who don't like giving money away.
Exactly.
So there's a good deal more, a huge amount more, in fact, investment in this field now as a result of that.
Oh, good news.
And this is what's going to be going on increasingly over the next couple of years.
Yes. Oh, superb. Thank you for the introduction, and love to hear more about that as well this evening. Thank you. And Chris, how are you?
I'm very well, Barry. I'm
Good. Thanks for
probably
joining us.
Bit of a surprise this evening. I was
Yes.
my colleague Joseph was supposed to be on. He's unfortunately broken his leg. He's in hospital, so
Yeah.
I hope he's getting well on the road to recovery and
Likewise.
being floated in instead.
Well, exactly.
I'm Chris Poynton. I'm one of the founders of a company called Graceful, and our viewpoint is really that activity is one of the best things you can have. Physical activity is one of the best things you can use to improve all sorts of mental and physical circumstances for people.
Yes.
And if you could prescribe it and simply take an activity pill,
Right.
that would be amazing, wouldn't it? You the health benefits of that compared to most other treatments are incredible.
Well, absolutely. Have you brought some of these activity pills with you tonight?
Unfortunately, they don't exist.
Oh,
And
okay.
So in order to help people get more active, you need to deploy motivational situations for them.
Yes.
You know, sometimes if you're sick, you will do physiotherapy because you're in a chronic, or not in a chronic, you're in a critical situation.
Yes.
But most of the time, we're talking about more public health benefits, where you're trying to get active just to sort of improve your longevity, to improve, to push out some of these aging situations. And we find that the best way to get people motivated is to connect them with one another.
Interesting.
But also within that group to also have someone who is a cheerleader or is a knowledgeable professional, depending on the circumstance, someone who can convene that group, help them structure what they're doing, and also help them work with one another. And that way you take some of the pressure off the health provider. They're not having to go one-to-one for 30 people in a row.
Yes.
They can go one-to-many, and the people can support one another. And we built a platform around that to connect people together so that they can encourage one another,
Yes.
but also they can form a group which has activities and challenges that are coming from outside. And we target employers, healthcare professionals, especially when we're talking about sort of the social prescribing sort of ideas, and also charities and event organisers to help people get out and get more active.
Oh, excellent. So there's a core social element to motivation in being active, and yet technology can inform and influence that, like with your platform. So that's very interesting. We should discuss that further as well. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you.
And hello, Simon.
Barry, good evening.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So please, if you don't mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing recently.
Sure. Recently, well, I've been doing it for too long, it seems, but I'm one of the co-founders of Remind Me Care. Remind Me Care is an app, but also SaaS, that we launched a few years ago into the formal care sector, hospitals, daycare centres, memory clinics, which makes it possible for carers to deliver, well, it's a very hackneyed phrase, but person-centred care. How can you deliver person-centred care if you don't know anything about the person? And I experienced through family experience, basically, that carers knew nothing about my mother. My mother, well, she threw things at them, basically, because they treated her like a number. So we built a system that makes it possible for carers to capture that data that makes it possible to really know the person. And the remarkable thing is, if you know a person, you can find that you can reduce medication. So we are now being defined as a digitherapeutic. We're very close to being prescribed by the NHS as an alternative to medication. And so we're on that journey. I guess we're on that disruption journey that people talk about.
Exactly.
Of bringing technology to bear on something that's been only very traditionally treated for years.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating. The concept of, how do you say it, digital therapeutic, is something that our viewers might not be familiar with. How does that differ from previous therapies, as an example?
Well, it's an American phrase, and we love them for it. We've been trialling in Kingston Hospital for years with no terminology attached to what we were doing. The proposition being that when someone arrives at a hospital, for example, they're agitated. How do you calm them? Well, there's very few ways other than medication. But now, using our system, you can know that content that they engage, whether it's dementia or learning disabilities. And if you talk to them, they're put at their ease, and you're able to reduce the need for medication. So a digitherapeutic is an app that's either complementary or even a replacement for medication. So the Yanks named it. We're very grateful, and it's now caught on. It's a standard NHS policy. EMIS now are looking for, including us, for apps that are digitherapeutics, and NHS Digital are adopting them as well. So it's a classic example of innovation happening fast.
Yes.
A year ago, apps were, I won't say laughed at, but certainly in our area they were.
And not prescribed, were they?
And not prescribed, and now it's becoming mainstream very quickly. The
speed of technology innovation, I think, is just breathtaking, and lots of commentary about Moore's law, obviously, but then related to that, other applications of exponential growth and things like the concept of singularity and so forth. You mentioned that a lot has happened recently, Claire, in terms of the speed of what is it? Is it the technology to do the diagnosis, or is it the understanding of is it the speed of the development of the understanding of the illness which leads to new technologies, or both?
Well, sort of both. I mean, prostate cancer, as many of you probably know, it's all men in this group here. I mean, yeah, actually is the leading killer now of men in this country, and it actually, sadly, surpassed breast cancer this
Oh my
year
gosh.
in this country. So its incidence is huge. I mean, the good news is that more men are living with it, and the key is to catch it early. It's a notoriously slow-growing form of cancer, and
Yes.
if you catch it early, i.e. it's localized, it hasn't metastasized beyond the gland, you know, your chances of survival are very high. And equally, your chances of not having radical treatment, i.e. having a surgical removal of the gland, is also very high.
Right.
And you know what is kind of counterintuitive and ironic and frankly quite maddening is that despite the innovation, you know, being generated here in this country around using MRI, which I'll come back to in a second, the reality is the 2 years ago, 2016, the NIHR did its audit of prostate cancer in this country, and
Right.
the rate of men in this country who are diagnosed at first diagnosis with metastatic prostate cancer is still ridiculously high,
Right.
certainly compared to the U.S., which is down around 4%. So, you
So
have to
in a
begin-
nutshell, they're identified too late,
They're
or
identified
later
too
than
late.
later than need be.
Right, and part of that is, you know, it's a kind of a taboo subject. You know, men of a certain age don't have symptoms that they don't like to talk about, they feel uncomfortable with, so they have to go and present at a GP because there isn't a screening program like
Yes.
there is with mammography, for example, for breast cancer.
Oh, okay.
So men have to voluntarily go and discuss their symptoms, and then you have to have a GP who's knowledgeable about the various diagnostic pathways. So there's a lot of variables that are, you know, need to be overcome and understood to actually roll out this pathway. But you know, the good news is that yes, an MRI before biopsy can catch about 97%.
Which is outstanding. I mean,
so
that's amazing.
the message
isn't
to all
it?
you guys out there is A, get checked and insist on an MRI before
Exactly.
a biopsy.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting.
The biggest killer was trying to get the product into the NHS. How did you do that? Was it easy or?
It's not a product. I mean, there are a number of products. The key is, you know, it's been, this is a medical advance. I mean, this isn't a, you know, an app, not that I'm in any way judging apps. This is a medical advance. So, you know, you've had to really change the behavior and the practice of specialists. So,
Yes.
and the short answer is trials, evidence. So there was the PROMISE trial, which was published in January of 2017, and the big message there was that MRI can actually identify 97% of cancers, and it can rule out 30% of men. 30% will not need a biopsy. So you can begin to imagine the cost savings and everything else.
Yes.
Of those 70%, that MRI, that actual scan can then be used to create a very precision-led, targeted, accurate biopsy plan. And from that,
So
that's why we
again,
refer to
huge
the pathway.
savings as a
And
result
better
of
precision.
improved
Better
diagnosis.
diagnosis
Yeah.
and better precision.
Do you think there should be regular screening? Do you think we
That's-
should have screening of men over 50 for this? Like,
I think in my vision in the world there will be that, but it's again it comes back to evidence. At present, there's something called a PSA test, which is not a screening program, but it is a way to, a lot of people see it as a diagnostic, and it is clearly not a diagnostic. It is an indicator for further investigation.
Right. And are there costs associated with that, which
No,
are
that's
prohibitive?
you get that at a GP, and it's simply a blood sample is taken, and a lab looks for something called the prostate-specific antigen, which is a protein that the prostate gland emits. But because you might have an elevated relative to a baseline, over time, that could simply mean that there's an element of inflammation, or there's
Right.
an element of infection, or
Yeah.
there's a growth generally, which is all very natural and can be treated, and it's not cancerous. So there's a behavioral and kind of hearts and minds. I hate that phrase, but for a man who has an elevated PSA, no, you don't necessarily have cancer. You do require further investigation, and do make sure you ask for an MRI.
Yes, exactly.
But
So that's amazing how the technology innovation at the diagnosis level leads to an understanding of earlier, if you will, pathways and examinations and the benefits of that.
Yeah.
Does that relate to your work, Aubrey, or not really?
It does, yes. So, I mean, if you look at what we do in geriatric medicine overwhelmingly today, it consists of trying to eliminate the aspects of the health problems of old age from the body it rather looks like trying to cure these things. In other words, doing the same kind of thing that we do with infections, which is obviously completely crazy. I mean, it's completely brain dead, because at the end of the day, the things that go wrong with us late in life, the only reason why something can be specific to late life is by virtue of being a consequence of having lived a long time, having accumulated a bunch of initially pre-symptomatic damage, right, which eventually is not pre-symptomatic because the body is only set up to tolerate a certain amount of that damage. So, it's kind of crazy to try to pretend that we can cure Alzheimer's or whatever. What we need to do is prevent these things from happening at all. And the reason that we think this is a useful way to go is because if you look at the various types of, as I say, initially asymptomatic damage, the molecular and cellular changes that occur, these, first of all, they can be enumerated and characterized very concisely. So that's obviously, we've got our head around the problem. But also, for each of them, there is a reasonably plausible way to actually address it, and not just slow down the rate at which the body generates the type of damage in question, but actually to go in and repair that damage, eliminate it from the body so that the body will be genuinely rejuvenated. So that's our focus.
And so, for example, with activity and sport and technology to encourage that, are those clearly ways forward in the, what do you want to call it? Not the eliminating, but the reduction of likelihood?
Well, my take is that the things we can do today, whether it's having a good diet or doing the right amount of exercise or whatever, they definitely have value. I'm not saying don't do these things.
Oh, okay.
But what I always do have to emphasize is that there is a very tight limit on how much benefit we can actually expect to achieve as a result of living this way. At the moment, basically, if you live the way your mother told you to, if you essentially, you don't smoke, you don't get seriously overweight, you have a reasonably varied diet, then you're going to pretty much, you've got a high probability of living to 80. And not many people live to 90.
No.
Very, very few people live to 100, and even fewer live to 110.
Yes.
And nobody has lived beyond 122.
Right.
So
not yet. Maybe we're on the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we can basically say that slowing down the rate at which the body generates damage is not looking terribly promising.
No.
It's just that the damage is so complicated that understanding how it's laid down is, a mug's game. But if you are doing what we focus on, repairing damage, then you're essentially sidestepping our ignorance on this. What you're doing is you're saying, well, okay, let's let the damage get on and create itself, at the normal rate. And it doesn't matter because we're going to be fixing it up so that periodically, so that it never gets to the point when it has a pathogenic level of abundance.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. Lots to learn about, isn't there, in that field?
I am interested, actually. Is there a core approach to sort of an immunological way? So you are, in the same way that now you don't die of smallpox because we found ways to introduce and train the body to eradicate it, so that even the damage that's done is removed very quickly. It's the approach you're taking, one where you are looking at other forms of damage that are so-called natural aging, and seeing whether you can make the immune system more able to compete it, or
it's not just the immune system, but other than that, what you said is broadly correct. Certainly, I mean, the immune system itself goes downhill, of course, in late life, and that's one of the things we're fixing. Giving people a new thymus, for example. The thymus is an organ that is responsible for creating a huge population of cells that get us through until the age of 70 or 80, but eventually those cells are depleted and we need more of them. So that's one thing we're doing. But yes, it's not just the immune system. Every aspect of the body goes downhill one way or another because of the accumulation of problems that the body accumulates. I like to emphasize that this is really not something specific to living organisms even.
No.
That if you look at a car, cars accumulate rust and other stuff. Right?
Yes.
And the only real difference between cars and human beings is that we don't care very much about cars because we can always go out and buy a new one. That's why Henry Ford succeeded in making so much money out of the idea of planned obsolescence.
Yes.
He relied on the laziness of his customers.
Yeah,
So
but
we
if you
need-
had a car in Boston, Massachusetts versus, Miami, it's going to rust at a very different rate, if at all.
Well, actually, not
That's true.
that different. Not all that different. I mean, the comparison that I want to emphasize is between cars like that, whether in Boston or Miami, versus vintage cars that are more than 100 years old. Those cars are still working every bit as well as when they were built.
Well, I guess my point is more about environmental damage. I mean,
Oh
there's
yeah,
so
so
many
environmental
variables.
damage
Yeah.
matters, but inherent damage that's going to happen whatever you do, so long as you don't just keep your car in the garage, which is equivalent to being in a coma, right? That's bigger. So a car that's 100 years old did not get that way because it was well treated in the way that, being in Miami. It got that way because it had unusually comprehensive levels of preventative maintenance done to it throughout its existence.
Aubrey, that's where lifestyle comes in, and we've been doing what we've been doing with Remind Me Care for 4 years, and it's only recently that we've suddenly garnered a lot of attention from the NHS and from people generally, because there's a sudden recognition that when it comes to Alzheimer's, for example, 99.4% failure rate of trials for new pharma? It's just not going to happen. There's no cure on the horizon. So you've got to start looking at prevention. And if you're looking at prevention, that's about understanding previous lifestyles. So we have the means.
So I want to push back on that a bit.
Or genetic determinants.
There's less than.
What are examples of what you guys have identified?
Well, we're in the early stages of collecting that data because we haven't gone to scale. In fact, we launch at Giant, as you well know. We launch our Alexa integrated app at Giant, and that will achieve greater engagement with consumers around the world. We'll be able to increase the size of the data set, but it's such that we will be able to capture knowledge of their lifestyles going right back, because they opt in to provide that knowledge to be able to enhance the care they receive through a carer knowing the person. Better person-centered care is delivered, but the byproduct is a massive data about their life.
Yes.
And on a managed opt-in basis, where the consumer has control, and we call them consumers, consumer has control of that data, we will be able to, and we're beginning to, look at lifestyles and determine how that can have an impact.
And do you validate that data? Do you verify it and validate
This is where we
it?
are now. We're starting to work with organizations that will validate it.
And Chris, is that a big thing for you guys, the collection of data and the potential applications of that? Or is that, how do you say it, is that maybe a side element of your platform?
It's a side element from us. A lot of the platforms that have been around for a while, they're very data focused. You measure everything, you have graphs, everybody sort of worries about counting this or reducing that.
Yes.
And we felt that there's a certain set of people who are motivated by that self-measurement.
Right.
There's a lot of people for whom that's a turn-off, and especially people who are taking their first steps, literally or metaphorically, in getting off the couch and actually getting active.
Yes.
That feels like the stuff that the buff toned people do. And, we wanted to take an approach that was much more using the technology to connect people together. Using the measurements, we do take measurements, we do GPS track people and step track and all the rest of it for their benefit, to provide them with information that connects them with other people.
Okay.
So they can share their progress, so other people can potentially collaborate with them.
Yes.
We do quite a lot with group goals. So for instance, you can set a challenge to a group that all between us we're going to do 100k this month. And that doesn't mean everybody goes and does 100k, but the person who does 3k will contribute that part of moving towards the goal, and the person who's a bit further down the line can do 20k and they've moved.
And that's a big
forward too.
motivator.
Yeah, because then you're in a group and the group achieves something and you can celebrate together as a group.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit wishy-washy, but motivation is all about finding the connections, finding something so that if you are the one that's having a wobbly day, hopefully within the group there are other people who aren't having a wobbly day, and they can pick up the general sort of feel of the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. The impact for the individual of the group and how the platform can impact on that.
That's representative of the change that's happening in care, which is the critical change, and that is consumers, patients becoming engaged in their care themselves, as opposed to being told to. take care of yourself, told to take this pill, told to do that. There's a move which is partly policy driven, but is really societally driven and socially driven to have the consumer take responsibility for their care.
Well, exactly.
What you're talking about.
And we hope a very slow but steady move from, how do you say it, from sick care to wellness.
Exactly.
And well, unfortunately, we're running out of time this evening, but thanks to all of you guys for joining us, and thank you for the brilliant discussion and the valuable contribution. What I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you guys we'll go around, and if you have a little closing comment that you want to make, or in particular, if you have a vision of the future that you're working on, we'd love to hear that. So Claire, if you don't mind, if you start, just a little tiny, what are you working on leading to any particular vision you have or hope for the future?
Well, as I said, we would really like to make sure that all men and their families get access to the MRI pathway. And we would like to see, in not too long a period of time, that rate of metastatic at first diagnosis dropping to zero. There's absolutely no reason why it has to be that high, and that's a measurable goal. And we do see a world where, as Chris, you said, why isn't there a screening program? There's a whole bunch of answers that unfortunately we can't really get to in here, but and I mentioned things like PSA, and these are all very valuable in the pathway. But the reality is we do have the technology and the know-how, and final message to all men: go to your doctor if you have any concern, and make sure you get an MRI.
Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And Aubrey, unfortunately, we don't have too much time, but if you have a brief vision of the future.
Sure. So, as you've seen, my focus is on the more distant future than everyone else here. But that's okay, because I think that the thing I want to emphasize is the continuity between the two, between the near term and the long term. The fact that it will, in the long run, become less important to do the kinds of things that we do today, improving diagnostics and so on, because we're going to be able to fix stuff even when it's already moved along a bit.
Oh, wow.
But only in the end that's going to be the case. Only when the work that people like myself are working on actually comes to fruition. Right now, we have it's hugely important to look after yourself in all ways, all the ways that you've been hearing about from the other people. And the motivation to do that may be increased. The ability of the rest of you to actually persuade people to do what you want them to do, to look after their health and to get their diagnosis and so on, may be improved by the realization that if they do so, they have a higher chance, a higher probability of actually still being around in a good state of health, or a reasonable state of health, for the kind of stuff that I work on to come along. So I believe that it's actually quite important to emphasize this linkage.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. And how about you, Chris?
I guess I want to pick up a little bit on the sort of patient-centered idea, and maybe more the consumer-centered idea. That it's the center of a network, and there are a lot of ways in which people can be reached to improve their health and activity. And so employers are part of that, the health service is part of that, sporting bodies, the sort of dissemination of best practice, and bringing people together in groups so they then support one another, so that the whole thing isn't just provider to individual as a single channel all the time. I think there's a lot of benefit both on the load on the system and in terms of people's actual outcomes, to connect them together with someone to help them through.
The network effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, very, very good. Thank you. And Simon, if you don't mind, just a closing minute, please.
Our mission is very clear. We want to bring technology to bear on person-centered care wherever it's not there on that care journey from diagnosis to end of life. So I'm going to end with a shameless plug.
Okay.
We launched recently our system, and we're launching at Giant our Alexa integrated system, which makes it possible for people to deliver person-centered care to their families remotely via Alexa, via tablets, via TV. So basically it's a fun way to ensure remote engagement in person-centered care.
Fabulous. How do people find out about it?
We're on the app stores. We can go to our website, remindmecare.com. You can download from Apple or Android stores. And it's fun but very powerful person-centered care tool.
Nice one. We look forward to learning more about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Again, thanks to everybody. Great to see you guys, and really, really grateful and humbling for me to have you joining us. So thank you, and I love all the innovations and the positive good work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Once again, my name is Barry Schreier, and I've been your host. Thank you very much to all of our viewers from around the world. This is our weekly Healthy Innovators TV. The show is sponsored by Giant Health, which is Europe's leading innovation festival of healthcare, technology, business, and innovation. If you're interested in coming to Giant this year, please go to the website www.gianthealthevent.com, and you can learn more about the event, which this year is on the 21st and the 22nd of November in central London. So thanks to all of our viewers. And also I'd like to thank our amazing television studio and media partners, Disruptive Live. They are clearly the finest television studio and media technologists on earth in the history of communication, and we're grateful for our valuable partnership with them. So thanks, guys. You can stick along with us.